Welcome to the Homeschool Together podcast. Where one working mom and a stay-at-home dad help you navigate the nuts and bolts of the growing and dynamic world of homeschooling.
With a focus on early learners, like me.
All the ins and outs of building and maintaining your homeschool life.
Homeschool.
Find out tips and tricks to make things like this easier.
I'm reading.
And ultimately, enjoy educating your kids. And what's that last thing?
Have fun together. Did I do good, Daddy?
Yeah, you did, sweetie. Good job. Hello and welcome back to Homeschool Together. Mr. Matt here has a very gravelly voice. I was yelling at some third and fourth graders on the volleyball court today, so I'm going to be deep in the gravel tone. So if you want to head down into the show notes below, I got a project for you. If you saw the title, we're project-based today. Head down in there, click on some things, subscribe on YouTube, check out our Gumroad page, and leave us a review on iTunes. I promise we will not talk about any AI stuff today. And so anyway, let's go ahead and get into it. Miss Ariel, project-based learning. I think this is kind of an element of homeschool that sometimes gets missed. I know in a lot of my studies for my teaching certification, they stress a lot of project-based learning, especially collaborative project-based learning as part of the classroom exercises. So I know that's probably more in line with crowd management in a classroom. But I think the idea of giving projects is something that's underfilled within our curriculum. I know we've gone through a number of levels of various curriculums, and the act of doing larger projects, we haven't actually touched on yet.
No, we haven't.
And now we have sometimes like continuing crafts, I would like to call it, where we're doing something where we're adding to it over time based on the theme, but actually giving like a larger based project, a multi-day effort, a multi-day a thing that we are putting together or studying about, and then coming back and giving some type of presentation or making a video or doing some large art craft or whatever to then articulate the knowledge that we learned along the way. I think it's something we have not done a lot of with our girls.
We haven't. I mean, I think it's typically something that happens for older learners. Older elementary kind of starts that, and then, getting obviously up through middle and high school ages. That's not to say that you can't do it with younger learners, but there's a certain amount of investment that has to go into from both sides, from your learner's side and from your side, to prepare that project and support it. I know that as a Girl Scout leader, there's lots of, projects and things we work on, and it's definitely a partnership there, because it's not like, if your student really wants to do projects, you can't just be like, okay, great. Yeah, go for it. There's a lot of support that they need from you. And I think and a lot of folks with, younger learners, kind of those earlier elementary kids, they're not able to really sustain their interest and focus to do projects, and there's lots of them that are just that's not been our experience yet. But projects are really important. It's definitely experiential learning, but it's also that your kids take ownership of the project that they're working on. They can get curious about something, they own it. They're going to build lots of real world skills. I mean, everything we kind of do in our lives is a project, right?
I think that's a great analogy. Like, it is very real world.
Right. You've got to plan it, and then you're going to figure out how you're going to manage your time, what resources you need for it.
A lot of executive functioning aspects here, more higher level thinking that we're asking from our learners. Something that like almost, I can't imagine anything I did in my tech career that wasn't a project in some form.
Right. Even if it's just a small effort you've been asked to do, it's all sort of a project, right? You have to get curious about what you're going to have to do. Then you're going to do your research. You're going to develop a plan, figure out what you need, figure out how long it's going to take, execute that plan. Something is not going to go the way you planned for it to go. And then you're going to have to pivot. I mean, that's a lot of real world skills. And it really, having a great project can really deepen our kids' understanding not only, creating the project, but then as you talked about, like teaching it, maybe you're going to give an oral presentation or whatever. So then they get to share what they learned with other people, whether it's you or grandma, grandpa, or siblings or whatever. So, I mean, it's got a lot of great facets that really prepare them for life. And it also is an awesome way to include multiple subjects, right?
Yeah,
because it's there's a reading component, maybe it's a science project, or maybe it's a history project, and there's going to be writing and reading and different kinds of research, and maybe there's going to be art involved with it. I mean, you can really put a lot of things together. If you have students that don't love a certain subject, it could be a great way to incorporate that into something meaningful. And it's a great way to scale something from, hey, I have a single learner that wants to do something, or I've got a family project we want to work on. We're all going to build a model of the pyramids of Giza, or we're all going to, I would say that when you're doing like a history cycle, if you're doing like a history timeline, for example, that's a form of a project, and the whole family gets on doing the timeline and decorating the timeline and those things. So you could also do it as a co-op or small group.
Pull in a sibling if you want to kind of scaffold your project.
Well, right.
Those
and
lines,
then just like
lines.
Real projects with, engineering, and definitely, right. You get, but people have different skill sets. So, if we're going to use the timeline as an example, maybe our older daughter would be the one who's actually writing the labels on the timeline, and our younger daughter's really the artist. So she might be decorating that timeline, and
that's a great point.
Whatever. So everyone could bring their own strengths to it, and so I think there's a lot of advantages to project-based learning. I think it's something that we'd really love to do as our kids get older. So I got kind of curious about this. I think maybe, I want to say a listener emailed me about this and said, have you thought about project-based learning? And I was like, oh shoot, I really haven't. And then I started doing some research, and I'm like, man, this sounds awesome. So we wanted to present some ideas today from that research.
Absolutely. So when you are thinking about doing some project-based learning, with your learner, whether it's one learner or multiple learners, and kind of key on what you said, it really explore the idea of, covering multiple children, bringing in another homeschool family that you may have to do kind of a collaborative work here. Yeah. It's great skills. It's a lot of social emotional stuff in there. Managing your time is really great. But to help these young learners start with their project, giving them basically a driving question, I think, is the first way we want to give it into them, help them, right? Some open-ended question, something that's interesting. Maybe it ties into some real world aspects, but really give them that big, broad question and allow them to start to noodle on that. And actually, because a lot of times I feel when we're doing our homeschooling and we're doing our curriculum, it's very closed. It's like we're doing this thing. And very often we don't allow them to explore and investigate and be dynamic. I feel like sometimes I'm very, stilted in that manner, and giving them opportunities. And I see this sometimes, with my oldest, when she sees a tool that's being used, like maybe I'm sitting in on a class or something and we're using a super cool software tool. We use WeVideo to edit videos and stuff like that. She's like, oh, Dad, can I play with that? I'm like, oh, absolutely. You can play with it. Give it to her. Hey, why don't you make something about yourself? Tell me about you in a minute. And she went out there for like hours and just built this huge, awesome project, and all the skills, and she was typing and she was making things. And it really, I gave her just an open-ended question, said, hey, could you make me this? And she goes, yeah, I absolutely would want to do this. I want to play with this. I want to try this. And just seeing the creativity that kind of erupted out of there. I noticed that maybe 6 or 7 months ago in last year's school year. I was like, wow, I really need to start thinking about giving her more open-ended things.
Yeah, a lot of times we give something with, we're asking them to answer a question.
Yeah, very narrow.
You're right. Yeah. It's narrow. It's not open-ended. So if we're going to start with project-based learning, we need to start with that really driving question. So it's, like you say, it's open-ended. It's also something that's interesting to our learner and in some way tied to real-world ideas. Right? I'm not saying you can't do a project based on a literary character or something, but even that ends up having tie-ins to real world applications and stuff. So, but it needs to be really interesting for them. And then part of the open-endedness is not necessarily fully defining the question, but letting your learner and their curiosity help you to help them to define the question, right? So if you want to do some sort of project about volcanoes, for example, I don't know why volcanoes is always my go-to, guys.
Our youngest loves volcanoes, so
maybe that's why. Or maybe it's spaceships. Okay, we're doing lots of space stuff, so maybe it's spaceships. So you could say something about like the project you want to give them is, what would it take for a spaceship to reach Pluto? You know, what would that take, or what would it look like if we were going to settle on Pluto, for example? But, you know, your learner might not really be interested in that. You could say, hey, I want to do a project. Let's do a project about space. What's a question that you have about space? And they could say something like, you know, how could we explore the sun? Or, you know, how could we terraform Mars? Or whatever, right? Let them define what the question is. You could kind of give them the rough area, but if we box them in too much, and I've noticed this with the scouts too, as I'm trying, now they're juniors, I'm trying to, you know, give them all these opportunities to really make their own decisions about what badges they want to work on and how they want to tackle things. And some of them are open-ended.
Strong and capable women.
Strong, capable women. Sometimes I'm trying to, some of these are like leadership badges and things where they need to pick something they want to do. And I can kind of give them little nudges and guidance, but every time I try to box them in, they have lots of ideas. We've got smart kids with very interesting ideas and things to say. And if we can kind of say, well, maybe it's in this zone. What are you curious about? That's a great way to start with to make a driving question.
Absolutely. I agree. Kind of moving on from there, choosing the scope and the subjects can be a challenge a little bit.
Right. Yeah. We're not going to boil the ocean here.
Yeah, I know. You know, deciding basically how big the project can be. That's something that our oldest does, where she'll get an idea and it's very grand. And
it's huge.
Talk about project slippage or scope creep.
Well, she always, when she comes up with something and she's like, okay, I want to do this thing, it's always like super unattainable. So she's learning to sew, for example, and she has been, this is going to be her third year in sewing class, which she really loves. It's mostly about chatting. It's a little less about sewing, although her BFF's in there now, and I think they're actually going to sew some stuff. So, but she says, Mom, I want to make my own gown. And I'm like, how about we start with a purse? Or how about a skirt? If you want to make clothes, let's start with a skirt. That's like the easiest thing. Or pajama pants. Let's make pajama pants. Yeah. Like, you know, you have to start with something that's like attainable. And then, I mean, I will support her in all her ball gown dreams. But, you know, if we took on a project like that, for an adult, that's a massive project. And she has no experience in it. And so that would be crazy, right? Yeah. But I could see a project like that where, you know, she's researching maybe the history of those type of gowns and all about the materials and textiles that are used and blah, blah, blah. There could be a bunch of great stuff, but that's a good example of like, I love your curiosity and your enthusiasm, except that's maybe impossible for us to do. Or this is the elaborate Halloween costume that's always comes in like 3 weeks before Halloween, and it's going to involve what I know is tens of hours of work. I'm like, I don't think so.
Or when you decide to sew the duck costume for your daughter.
Listen,
Talk about scope creep.
I was a new mom. It was her first Halloween. And I'm like, I'm going to make her a costume. $100. And 100 hours later, my child is screaming, crying because she hates it. She's a giant fluffy duck. But we have a really great picture of her losing her mind when we put it on her. And she was, So
it was cute. It was cute.
But yeah, I realized like, wow, that wasn't a good idea. So
but as you help them narrow, help them scope it down.
Scope it down to something that's reasonable, that, you know, that you feel that is probably achievable, because you're going to need to support them.
Well, and coming off of the open-ended question, you get the big grand idea, like, oh, let's build a rocket ship in the backyard, Mom. No problem. We can do it.
Right.
You're like, nah, we really can't. You're like, you're absolutely right. You know, helping them scope that down.
And we can do that too by talking about like, how much time do we want this project to be? Yeah. So you can ask them, how much time do you want to work on this?
Especially with these
2 weeks or
especially with these early learners, maybe middle, upper elementary. I mean, we're really looking at maybe like a day or two. right? A couple days,
I mean,
maybe
I
3
think
days.
it could be. I think
Nothing too long.
upper elementary can absolutely be a couple week project, right? We did book reports. I remember doing dioramas, right?
Yeah.
Read the book and you do the diorama in a
we
shoebox.
We all did it in the last day, you know.
I mean, sure we did, but we had a couple weeks to plan it. So, and read the book, right? So, how many of us used the shoebox with glued the sand down to make the diorama? Anyhow, so yeah, and I remember being in like maybe upper elementary school when I did an entire like model of the first Olympics on poster board, and so it's not. Oh, and I did a big mission. I did a big California mission.
Well, I mean, just when we first
Popsicle
start off, I think we want to ease them into it because a lot of times when
start small.
when we're starting into this kind of project-based thing, or we're asking our learner to be more independent, that's not something that they understand how to do right out the bat. That is something that we have to model. We have to guide them through. So maybe starting off with kind of some baby projects, helping them through those, setting the expectations, helping them learn how to ask the right questions, learn how to create the content in the right way. You can't just expect them to say, oh, here, use Google Slides and make a PowerPoint presentation if they've never put together a PowerPoint presentation together or make a diorama or whatever it might be. So starting off, I think, a little bit smaller and working your way up to your, life scale, 1/64th scale of the Olympics and everything like that.
The California mission that I built with popsicle sticks was really a thing of beauty.
I'm sure it was.
They all had all the little pews and it was all made out of popsicle sticks. And it was this massive popsicle stick masterpiece for California history. So yes, you're right. Like, let's start small before we break out the hundreds of popsicle sticks or sugar cubes or whatever we're using.
And as you do that, as you help them, as you guide them, you get to take advantage of the fact that you can find subjects that are kind of related to each other and help guide them in that direction. So you might do some science project, but you'll fold in a little bit of math. Right. You'll do some ELA and maybe put in a little bit of history, or it's a history project and you'll fold in some ELA. Maybe they got to do some writing experiments. And,
and that's where it's going to be up to you to kind of help bring in these different subjects. Okay,
Absolutely.
here's the size and scale of this project that we're going to do, and here's the different elements that you want to bring in. And then it's about planning what that process is going to look like with your learner, right? You're really guiding them to plan the process. So it's like, what are the phases? Well, the first phase in most all projects is to research, and maybe it is a book project, and so it would be to read the book. But there's always some amount of research, whether you're going to use books at the library or websites, or you're going to interview your person at their local historical society,
YouTube videos, and
whatever
like that,
it is, right? So there's a research component usually,
and you would expect to provide those materials maybe on the first few projects, and maybe help guide our learners along the way to say, okay, I now want you to go look for resources and then teach them, skills around what is a good resource and what is a good
what's
source.
a trusted resource,
all that stuff.
and so then you're going to plan it. So there's a research phase. There's going to be some sort of planning phase where they're going to figure out, okay, I've done my research. I know what this is now. Now, what is the thing I'm going to make? And I'm going to sketch it. Yeah. I've got to plan out what materials I might need if it's something crafty related.
And really helping them understand the benefit of planning. Think about us. We don't like to plan stuff. We never planned, or you did.
Be for yourself. I love to plan things.
To plan out like
it's my jam.
Papers and whatnot. And you just look at any kid who goes into school. They hate planning. They just want to do it, right? I don't know. Maybe I'm speaking for myself.
I mean, I've always been a planner,
right.
But it comes naturally to me, and it doesn't come naturally to everyone.
It doesn't, no.
So that's true.
That may be a skill that we have to teach.
Right. It's guiding them in the planning process and then helping them in the execution of creating whatever it is, whether it's a science project or it's a presentation or it's a massive model or a diorama or whatever the thing is, helping with guiding that creation process, whether it's building or writing or designing, whatever the thing is, and giving them some guidance. And then the next step is obviously the presentation of it. So
and maybe
whatever that's going to be,
maybe along the ways on those first few, or maybe something you could give to them a little bit of support, and maybe some checklist items to remind them what they probably need to do, and maybe even make certain things deliverables as part of the project. Like,
sure, the plan is a deliverable.
Along the way, I need you to check in with me and show me what you've done. So one of the ways
shopping list is a deliverable.
And one of those things could be the plan. Another one could be, sketch of what you're doing, or if you're making a video, you make me a storyboard before you make the video, and all that type of thing. Whatever it ends up being, being able to help our learners through a little bit of a checklist may be something we can help, give to them.
Well, right. And if you do something like that too, you make sure that they don't go too far, off to left field, something that's hard to recover from or sets themselves up for so much work that they wouldn't be achievable. So you could help them. And I think that the presentation part at the end is really an important component, because it's not just about actually doing the work. It's about being able to communicate that to others. And that's a huge part of adult life. And it cements the learning too, for them to present it. We love to present to Nana and Papa over our Google Hub. Or Grandma and Grandpa on FaceTime. That works great. Yep. And I think it's more meaningful to our kids to do that rather than present it to us, because we've been involved in the whole process.
Yeah.
So that's not, they're kind of like, you've been here for, why would we want to talk about this? And we haven't done big projects with them, but even art projects that we've done and stuff, we've done it together.
And stuff like that, yeah.
So we did, we made a Rice Krispie model of the Nile with little Toblerone pyramids. It was really cute. But then some friends came over for dinner that night, and we didn't have a dessert. And we're like, well, there's this giant Rice Krispie treat model thing. Well, maybe we'll eat that. And we suggested that our daughter tell about what she had learned while putting it together. And she just scoffed, because she was like, well, Mom, you were here for all of this. Why would I tell this again? I'm like, well, these people weren't here for it. Tell us all. And she was just like, why don't you tell them you were here? Right. So when we bring in the third party, like Grandma and Grandpa or whatever, and we kind of leave the room, we're not part of it, we let them stand on their own, then they're excited to share the things that they're doing, or share their artwork or whatever it is. So the presentation part's really key. We shouldn't forget about that. Just turn in the project and be done.
Absolutely. It brings it into reality, kind of.
Yeah.
What you're saying is, and I like the idea of leaving and allowing them to take over and own the presentation, because they are comfortable, with grandparents or maybe an aunt or an uncle.
And you can talk with Grandma and Grandpa or aunt and uncle or whatever later and say, hey, how did they do? What would be your evaluation of how they did? You don't have to listen to the whole thing.
Yeah.
But be there to support them. But that presentation part,
it kind of makes it matter.
It does. And if you have a child who feels really uncomfortable about oral presentations, it could be a slide deck that they put together.
Yeah.
It could be a little video. They do a little voiceover. Recording a voiceover video on a Windows PC could not be simpler.
Couldn't be
You've
easier.
been doing a bunch of these lately for your class stuff. And so, it could be something like that if you have a student that doesn't feel comfortable with an oral presentation. It doesn't always have to be that way. Or it could be just a written project if you've got a student that you want this project to be solely about writing. So there's lots of options, but the presentation's important. And that's part of the plan. And the last piece of the plan is to plan how they're going to reflect on their work. And that's something we can't forget about, because mostly they don't really do that in normal school environments, right? Because you'd make a presentation to the teacher, whatever, turn in your project or assignment. They're going to give you a grade, and the thought is that whatever feedback the teacher gives you in that grade is meant for you to reflect. But how many of us really did that?
Yeah.
We saw that grade. If the grade was good, if there's a couple words on it, it was okay. It wasn't, I would say if we did reflect, it wasn't a meaningful reflection.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
So that's an important part of them assessing, well, what did go well? What didn't go well? What would I do next time so that we can learn and make the next project better?
Yeah. The technical term is metacognition. So thinking about how you thought or how you did things and seeing if you could
That
fix.
sounds very smart, metacognition.
No, that's the fancy. If you're going to Google search it, that's how you do it. But basically you're thinking about or analyzing how you think, how does your mind work, understanding your process, understanding what you did to get to that point. And then you're right, taking the feedback that was given to you, like the teacher's feedback or your parent, or, as you as the educator, give them feedback and say, okay, here's the feedback. Here's your personal self-reflection as well. And then let's go ahead and see what can we change for the next project. Do we need a better checklist? It's kind of like a post-mortem in some respects.
Right.
We used to do this as part of our projects in the tech companies. Whenever we would send out a piece of software or something like that, we would reflect on the process that we went through to get there. And it was like a 1 hour meeting. It wasn't a lot. And we'd all sit around the table and say, what problems did we run into? And are there new things that we can put into our process or into like, the checklist items that we have to do to close things that could alleviate the problems before? And this even gets even more wonky in companies that really are process heavy. If your project slipped by more than a certain amount of time, it immediately triggers what we called a root cause corrective action.
Mm-hmm.
And we had to do like an 8D or whatever on it. And we had to go through, why did we make the mistake? And then we would drill down to the actual problem. And sometimes these are very contentious, and it can feel...
The problem was Bob. Bob was the problem.
Well, it can feel very much like, you're right, somebody's getting the pressure put on them, but they were never accusatory. And that was always the framing of the meeting. It's like, we're going to get to a problem. If it's you are the problem, or if this person was the problem, or they did something wrong, that is immaterial. We don't care about that. And it's hard to separate yourself from that, because a lot of times, like for me, because I was the requirements guy, it was my fault a lot of times. Like, I didn't give the right requirements. Where did you get that information? Oh, I misinterpreted it from here. Okay, how can we? And the goal was at the very end to find a corrective action for the process. And even like sometimes an RCCA of a failed project would trigger a change to the overall process. We would put a new checklist item in. We would put a new feature in this type of document. We would add a new line item in the template document that we used to create the requirements to go into here, because we found a hole. And that's the goal, is to find the holes so that we can plug them so we're better next time. And that's a very advanced version of kind of what we're talking about. But just to know that when we're thinking about our children, these types of thoughts and stuff is what a lot of companies will go through when they're trying to be more efficient. And for us, process people can
trying to learn.
And trying to learn. And
the companies are trying to learn
as an
what
organization,
makes it better.
You're absolutely right. We were always trying to learn. And it's funny looking back on it now, like this, we went with it. We were like, yeah, we got to be better, because we saw process as quality. Because if we could put together a really good process, we could run faster. Believe it or not, we can move faster if we are moving all in the right direction.
Yeah.
But also, if the process will ensure that the product at the end is better than what it would have been without the process. And so the same type of thinking can be applied to our students when we're trying to reflect with them. And this could be very difficult, especially for a younger learner, having them think about how they think. That's not something they're normally asked to do. But the more we do that with like a reflection journal, or we do kind of a post-mortem on the end of the project, asking them those pointed questions about, what were you thinking in this, and how can we do this better, and those type of things. And sometimes we may need to bring some ideas to them. Like, do you think a checklist works for you? No, Mom, a checklist doesn't work for me. Okay, well, maybe we could try this other thing. And, or would a template work better? Yeah, I think if I just worked from something, that's general, that I can then move better, right?
Maybe it would have been better if I sketched it first before I did the project. That would have helped me know where I was going.
But thinking about the process, and I know it's a kind of a joke, but the process is so, for me, I've learned to love the process and not enjoy the outcomes. I don't care about the outcome, because the outcome is, as I said, it's immaterial to what it is. It's all about the process. It's
right.
It's taking the short-term satisfaction of success and shifting the enjoyment to the work that it takes to get better. And as opposed to working towards a goal, like, I'm trying to hit a certain mile, or I'm trying to lift a certain weight or whatnot. It's not about that. It's about me being better and incrementally being better along the way. And success will come from that, because I trust the process. Nick Saban was a big process guy when he was at Alabama. Couldn't care less on, the guy from...
about the results. It was about the process.
Yeah, the guy from... He coached the college team. I can't remember which one. It was Bradley or Butler. Butler. He went on to coach the Celtics, and then he became the GM for the Celtics, and they won their championship a couple of years ago. Something Brad Smith or whatever. There's a famous video, and I'll put it in the show notes, where his team upsets another team in like the Final Four, and it was on their ride to the championship. And the guy who I was listening to was analyzing his team. He called up the play. They ran down the court. The guy makes the basket. and he just turns and knows the ball's going in. Doesn't jump and scream like everybody else would, like winning the game. He just knew because he trusted the process and went over and shook the other coach's hand and just walked off. And his team just won the big game, right? That type of thing. But he doesn't get caught up in the end goal. It's all about the process. And I'm a big process guy for this. I think I can talk about this all day long.
Even if you're not going to do the same thing. I mean, so when we talk about process, especially in company terms, right? It's doing similar things over and over again. But just like in engineering, we're always making something different, right? So it's not that the kids are going to be doing that process would be the same on the next project, but there's going to be elements of planning and understanding what works best with their brain, with their organizational style.
That's a great point.
And I think encouraging them to make, if this isn't a crafty thing, if it's something written or whatever, make a draft. Or if you do a presentation and it didn't go the way they wanted it to, do a do-over, right? Learn from the experience and think about with the reflection, well, if I was going to approach this next time, what would I do differently? And that helps, that not only helps them to do a better job the next project, but helps us to understand better how we can support them.
And teaching them how to think about the process like that, we're empowering them to be better learners.
It's a problem-solving process is really what you're talking about, right? Because there's a problem. They have a question that they want to answer, and that's the problem. And the process is figuring out how they're going to answer that question, what experiment are they going to do, or what research are they going to conduct, and then how are they going to present that information out. And one opportunity for presentation too, we've been talking with our daughters about this because we have a fair, the state fair is not far from us, and we've been talking about like, that would be really fun too, to have our daughters make a project with the intention of submitting it to the fair.
That could be the presentation.
And that could be the presentation, right? It doesn't have to necessarily be for us, but judges are going to see it. It's going to come back. And depending on the judging, then we can talk with them about that reflection as well. So there's different opportunities, but it's mostly about accountability for them and support where they need it and when they need it. And not the hard point that I have is not like taking over the whatever project or thing they're working on.
It's so hard. Yeah.
It's hard because I'm like, oh, you're really struggling. If you just, here, let's just do it this way. Right. And that's the biggest.
The learning is in the struggle.
Yeah. And it's a real challenge to support and not do.
Oh, it's the hardest thing.
That is so hard because I don't want to see them struggle. I want to see this be easier for them to do. And we have done some small projects and things, and I'm always like, oh, hey, let's try this option, and I know that I'm kind of taking over and influencing the way that they want to do it. And it's funny, we play lots of board games in our house. If you listen to the podcast for a while, you know that we love board games. And our older daughter especially, and now our younger daughter's starting to do it, but our older daughter, we kind of have this joke as we play with her. We play games that were pretty advanced, maybe a little bit more advanced than her age. And she'd want to go one direction. We go, oh, no, honey. Don't you want to do this other thing? Because we're trying to make sure she doesn't have a bad time, right? We don't want her to just totally...
It's from a good heart.
Yeah. We're coming from a good place. It's like, oh, no, hey, you're missing this opportunity or whatever. And she'd be like, no, just let me do what I'm going to do. And then she wins.
Yeah.
And then we have to like eat our words because that's not the way...
multiple times.
It's happened many times. And now
it's
our
to the
little...
point now where we catch it and we say,
don't let her do what she's going to do. And now the little one too. Half the time she loses horribly, and the other half the time she wins.
I know.
So it's like, okay, we're just letting her do her process. So it's really hard to support and not do.
Yeah, and going into giving some examples by age. If you have various age learners, we want to go ahead and give you some ideas,
just some thoughts.
So like if you were thinking about like an early elementary. Think about like designing a playground using blocks and drawings and presenting to the city council, being you and Dad.
Yeah. How would you design this?
Yeah.
Our older daughter loved to do room designs when she was younger.
They still do. They
draw room designs.
Guys, every time we think about getting rid of toys, things hit the cutting and they go,
we're like, okay, we're a couple months out from the holidays. Yeah. Let's go ahead and like get rid of things.
What do we have? We have rooms sitting in our living room, made from Duplos that we keep trying to get rid of. And
Every
time
year I try to pack up Duplos and Little People because they're toddler toys, and I can't.
they played with those Duplos for 8 hours the other day.
I
So
mean,
I
when
swear to
this morning they were playing for about an hour with those Duplos.
Absolutely.
And so I was gonna just kind of like, we were just gonna pack them up because they're good to have for little kids when they come over and stuff. But yeah, no, our kids are still into it.
It's amazing. So for like an so that was early elementary. Maybe for an upper elementary, you can think about, creating a state fair booth, which is kind of what you said. Maybe even a project to submit to the state fair.
Right.
But if that's too big, maybe you could also be the state fair judge. Maybe you could time it along those times where you go see some judging at the state fair and then you come home and maybe have that project.
That could be fun.
Whatever that might be. Now, for middle school, you can think about like maybe having them build a medieval castle, diorama kind of thinking, with a written guide, maybe a 3D map. Maybe they make a 3D model of it or whatnot.
Maybe they make some paper dolls of the different types of people that would live in the castle.
Yeah, talk about the feudal roles and stuff like that.
I made a very nice foam castle in high school.
You're amazing.
It was a Bastille actually for French class, and it was beautiful. It was giant, and it snowed that day, so it was really hard to get it into school. But I mean, these are the kind of projects like I want our kids to build a giant castle.
Yeah,
I think that sounds great. Whatever it is.
Well, and if you're thinking about like how big your, as obviously when they get a little bit older, those projects are going to become more grand. How many of these are you doing a year? Maybe once a month, maybe
or
every
less.
other month, every
Yeah.
other month. So you're really not, it's not something you're doing every day or every week. These are big things. These are big kind of like end of the unit type of things that you're doing. Maybe you're halfway through your ancient civilizations and you want to do a kind of a group project, maybe having them call back on something that was interesting to them, find an ancient civilization that they connected with, do kind of like a project-based, summary.
I think we should do something like this when we go to Ancients next year and have them do the pyramids or something from ancient Greece or whatever. Like, I think that would be really fun. It will take over the whole dining room table for a month, but I think it's worth it.
I think it is worth it. Now, if you have a high schooler, good luck. Enjoy yourself. They're only going to be there for a few more years.
Well, high school's kind of fun because they can really...
they could do so much more.
Well, right. And so you can make a project based on something that they might want to do as a career.
I think that's a really good point.
Maybe they want to run a business, and so you can have them like create a mock business, make a business plan, and the plan for marketing and their budget and all of maybe some promotional advertisement stuff.
If they're into software development or they want to be a computer science major, maybe have them design their own game or design a piece of software and then present that to you. This is a great point for you to leverage possibly what they are interested in, or tranches of things that they might be interested in to see if
good way to expose them, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You're thinking, you're kind of thinking in those two tracks where you go, okay, we have some academic goals that we want to match to meet, but also I want to see if you're interested in this stuff as possibly a career or a degree that you want to get. This is a good opportunity to kind of hit both of those.
Yeah, I think anything we can do to help our kids know before they graduate high school what they might want to do, and anything we can do to give them experience with that is just great, because it might just solidify that is what they would love to do or not. Sometimes I felt like when I decided to go to college, I just thought that it sounded cool. I had literally no experience that would have told me that was something I was going to enjoy. I just thought it sounded cool.
Super cool guy like me.
Well, I didn't meet you until I was a junior, right? I had already long ago made the decision that I was going to study engineering, but I had no experience in anything. I'd never built any kind of project or done anything to know that I would have liked that. It just happened to work out. And I think for so many young people, you stumble into it. For so many young people, it doesn't work out. They think something sounds great and then it's not the right thing. So if we can help our kids, even maybe younger than high school, to know if that, career path, or if it's maybe STEM or maybe healthcare, or other things they might be interested in, what might be the right zone even.
Well, you always talk about that story where you had a friend who their child wanted to get into veterinary science and stuff like that.
She wanted to be a vet.
And she did an internship and found out that's not for me.
Yep. She did an unpaid internship, sweeping floors and stuff, and just being in the vet office for several weeks. And she realized, and she was like, I want to say like 13 and realized that, oh, yeah, no, not for me at all.
Not for me at all, yeah.
I was like, great. And then she could move on to find something new that she's passionate about.
Absolutely. Now, just kind of wrapping things up here as we get to the end, talking a little bit about tips for success. Obviously, the first thing we want to do, if you haven't done much, project-based learning, obviously you want to start small.
Oh, yeah. This is advice to us. We should start small.
Yeah, absolutely. Mini projects, small projects, helping your learners through the process of designing them, all the various things they need to do, giving them that kind of grounding, and then starting to open up the projects from there, I think is a great place to start. And I think this applies to all ages, whether you're in high school, middle school, or elementary. Starting off small, if it's not something you've done before, obviously you want to kind of ease your way into it. And also, you as an educator, you may need to learn how to deliver that content or support that content in that way. And that may be something new for you to learn. And you want to be able to take it, you don't want to do a big project, jump into the big thing. You want to go a little bit smaller, ease yourself into it.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things we did the last time we did touring the world was our older daughter, she had a couple of template pages for being a travel guide. Yep. And so she had these and they actually were little mini projects each week that she would be researching what would happen if we took a trip to this country. Where would we go? Yeah. What would the budget be? What things would we see? How would we get there? Just what were some foods we would try, stuff like that. So it was pretty open-ended, and it ended up being a little bit much for her. But she had some great results on some of those weeks, and some of them it ended up being a bit much. But it was a good first kind of basic entry project. And I think in both Build Your Library, Zero, and Torchlight K, they both have little open-ended kind of researchy things. So there's some mini projects you can start with. But one of the most important things is that you help support them. You maybe set up some systems for success, but then you let them take the lead, even if it gets really messy. Yeah. Even if it's like they're going to have to backtrack because that's not going to work. You got to let them soft fail a little bit sometimes to learn. Just what you talked about, the struggle, right?
Yeah. And then I think you as the educator, probably the thing that you'll probably want to generate on your side is, not rubrics in the sense of like listing out the things that you want to do, but just being able to, you as an educator, to evaluate the work, be able to talk about the effort. Yeah. What does completeness look like for this project?
Maybe think in terms of goals.
Goals, yeah.
Instead
what are we trying to accomplish here? And then laying
right.
those out at the beginning so that we can work towards them. It's hard to say, oh, we're going to do a big project and just get started. If you can put some goalposts down out in the future, you guys can work towards it and you can actually articulate where you need to go. It's hard to know where you're going to go if you don't have a target.
Right. Well, you're never going to get there.
You're never going to get there. You're going to create something strange. You, as the educator, may have an expectation in your head. If you don't communicate that or, articulate that to your learner, it's not their fault if they don't meet that target. So
absolutely,
it's pretty important for us as educators, as home educators, to make sure that our learners know exactly what they need to do with respect to this project. Obviously, talk to them, find out what type of demonstration of knowledge method you want to do, whether it's a video or a presentation or, something that you put up at the state fair or whatever it is, that the goal, and then we can work back from that.
Right. And it's not just the thing that they're going to create, but what are your overall goals for having them do this project?
Yeah, exactly.
Is your overall goal that it teaches them to be able to research independently? Mm-hmm. Is it to help solidify these science concepts? Is it, what's the overall goal? And then from there, you can decide, what does success look like to you? Success to me looks like, number one for me would be that the kids are not dreading working on this project, right? Mm-hmm. That they're okay, maybe not super enthusiastic, but they are okay working on it. They are learning something. If they're working together, that they are cooperating and learning how to take each other's ideas. Maybe that they're learning how to make a plan. Think about that kind of, there's academic goals, but there's also all these soft skills goals with doing a project.
Well, especially if you choose to make it collaborative in some way, that's a really important thing there. And finally, the final point is maybe try to stay away from the grading, maybe at the beginning. Obviously, if you're trying to build a portfolio for high school, obviously that would be one thing. But especially if you're just starting out, maybe keep the grading to a minimum. do more of like a informal evaluation.
Right.
Talk about
And we don't
the
really
effort.
We don't grade necessarily,
I
but
don't even know how I would grade a fourth grader doing a
yeah,
project-based thing.
we don't. But it's
I don't even think about grades. I just want to know that she demonstrates knowledge and what can we do to improve the next time.
Yeah, I guess it's more the mindset, right?
Yeah.
That's not like, oh, did you tick all my boxes that I had down here for the things that I wanted to see in this? But it's more like, did they grow and learn?
Did they learn some new skills that they can apply elsewhere?
Yeah, exactly. And they may have struggled a little bit, especially if they haven't done projects before or the project is in a new area. Like history projects always were fine for me. I couldn't do science projects, like something for the science fair. That was really challenging for me. And so maybe it's something that, your child has done lots of projects, but this is an area that they're not good at. Maybe it's a writing project and writing's really tough for them. So you have to... We got to celebrate the fact that they persevered through that as well, and that they were able to deliver something.
Yeah, I remember in my physics degree, and when I was at college, we had a lab at the end of my whole degree, and it was like the advanced lab or whatever it was. And I remember how hard that was because they gave us no guidance. They showed us, all right, you're going to do the milk and oil drop experiment to find out the charge of an electron, right? And it's like, okay, no, you're going to build the experiment. You're going to do a Nobel Prize winning experiment 100 years later, and you're going to write up an 80-page report on it. I'm like, I've never done anything like this. There's no guidance. We were just like struggling through it. You're absolutely right. Like giving that support to your learner makes the experience better. And I think they learn better. They appreciate it, and they can grow from there. But like I went through that, and it was awful. It was just a terrible experience.
Yeah.
And it didn't make me like, I fundamentally loved what we were doing. Like I did 3 Nobel Prize winning experiments in a 6-month period. I thought it was amazing. I hated every minute of producing the product at the end because there was no guidance there. But I wouldn't have had a problem writing the large report. I wouldn't have had a problem taking the data and displaying the data. That was no problem. It was just like the lack of care behind it. It was just brutal. And I always remember that. It's like, when I'm talking about projects, I always want to be supportive and I want to help and I want to be there for them. And teach them along the way and guide them, right? And make it an enjoyable thing and that they can then carry that forward. That's always stuck in my mind. It was like one of my, for my degree, I loved it. I loved every minute of it. I loved doing math. I loved doing all the physics in the world. But that one thing, it really stuck me.
I had a lot of projects that, we didn't get good guidance. And so I think
it was awful.
This is a learning experience for us too, as our girls start to get older, and we start to give them projects about how can we give good guidelines and good guidance without doing it for them. How can we be supportive, and know when they're stuck and they need us, or versus just get out of the way and let them work.
Exactly. And one last closing thought for me. If you can, think about how you can dovetail this with your existing curriculum. Not as something you're adding on top. I know we're talking about this new thing. Like, when do I have time? We just had a couple podcasts about juggling everything.
Yeah.
How do you add yet another thing into your homeschooling? This may be something that replaces something or displaces something.
Or this is a great transitionary thing too, right? Like maybe you're transitioning from one year of history to the next.
Exactly.
You're finishing one curriculum and starting a next. We usually take some sort of little break between just to give ourselves a little bit of a brain break on that subject. Maybe that's a great time to do a little project. Mostly though, if you can find something that your learners are super jazzed about, that makes the best foundation for a project
100%.
Because they're into it, they're excited, they're curious about it and want to learn, and I think that's the best place for it. And maybe that means that there's other pieces of the curriculum that you're like, you know what, we're just not going to do those pieces because we've decided to dive into a project instead. But these are just some ideas. We haven't done a whole lot of huge projects yet, but I know that it's in our future, and so I was glad to find this information when I was doing this research, because I think there's a lot of good stuff in here that we had a lot of conversations about about like
thinking about how we implement this, how
would we do this, and what did we like about some projects we did in school and in college and things, and what did we not like, and what are those elements that made it a better experience versus not. So hopefully this was helpful to y'all, and let us know if you do some really amazing projects. We would love to hear about them over on the Facebook group. Thanks so much for joining us today and making us a part of your homeschool journey. Please engage with us on social media. Join our Homeschool Together podcast group on Facebook and find us at Homeschool Together Podcast on Instagram. We'd love to hear your feedback, questions, and recommendations. Until next time.
Happy homeschooling!